clap your hands in front of your face, please. Perfect. Alrighty then. And when you're ready, start talking about the technical.
Hey, so I think that's all the continuity that I need to sort of bring in order to fact check this stuff, because essentially what I have today, and this isn't a post story. It's almost like I need the post to get to the TSD part of the PTSD. But it's become a technical problem in that the timeline documentation of dealings with the government in terms of documents, paperwork, ticket numbers, cell phone bills, bank records, all of when you consider everything that sort of goes through an average person's cell phone, when it stops working, sort of what's left on the table, and just pretending that you're still there. So in 2018, in May, I took a job in BC remotely. I just finished every obligation that I had in Alberta to kind of stop this cyclic misidentification happening. And the last sort of task I did for that was some volunteer hours in lieu of the traffic fine. I wound up getting a 6-month driving prohibition for driving while unauthorized. So the abstract, the information itself, in terms of just a spreadsheet document, had some patterns in it. And the timeline of the arrests and the turnaround for mailing the Alberta government and all of these repetitive circumstances had patterns in it. And when I came to BC, it was my hope that the information that BC had, because I was born here, I was born in Prince George, 1977, and I never lived anywhere else. I thought that it would be sort of a solid thing. Well, I sort of found out the very soon after I moved here, I kept my cell phone, the same device that had been repaired. The loaner was smashed in the arrest, and so I wound up having to pay for the loaner. But so I still had the device. Still had whatever's on a cell phone through between 2016 and 2018. That device had my GPS. It could at least say that, you know, this abstract was wrong, if anyone matters to anyone. And it was also a technical problem because I still had this lawsuit that was still on the books. So I became pretty careful with documentation of things for that year, especially with wireless communications. Call me paranoid, but I don't know how paranoid it can really be when you're sitting in a jail cell worried about the cops coming to get you. So these are the things on my mind when I came here that didn't expire when it was supposed to. It's still sort of in the electrical trade we call it being hung up. When a system is not interrupting the malevolent process as it happens, when a breaker doesn't trip, when a light's making a humming noise, when you see a pop when you flick on a pilot light or something that shouldn't be there. These little signs that everything's it's functioning, but it's not quite right. I sort of had all of those together in that cell phone when I moved here, and it was my my thinking that would end. But Alberta, they've got a private sort of duality between the motor vehicle registration and the identifying documents. And then it was sort of confounded in its timeline with the taxes and with the not voluntary medical preclusion from work. And so here I am sort of violating one law, having to comply with another sort of thing. And it was just insurmountable. It took 10 months before I could even go in and see that the abstract was bogus. And then once I could prove it, it was too late.
So what happened with the data and material?
Well, I've still got it. I've still got the standalone device. When I moved here, it was a year that I held on to that telephone number, just so that I could maintain communications with, what I was leaving in Alberta. My mom sold the house, and I got offered a job here in Kelowna. Timing couldn't have been better. I couldn't really afford where I was living. Always wanted to come back to BC anyway. And my grandparents were from Winfield. I don't know why they call it Lake Country now. It'll always be Winfield to me. But my grandmother, she was an alderman there. My grandfather was a carpenter. So Kelowna was always a place that I loved. Like, I came here. And so that sort of all came together. I moved here. I still had a 780 number until May, end of May, just this year. And at that point, I lost the job at Source Electric because this suspension, this driving suspension, still hasn't timed out. And so, for whatever reason, the Alberta government's computers sort of are telling ICBC, and they're aware of this because I've faxed them receipts, and I've sort of made a habit of keeping a log and just sending almost like a weekly reminder, just saying, I'm still here, this is still my file number, nothing has changed, still wrong, I still can't get my license. And so when my Alberta license expired, that was like a 5-year expiry for the license. Before that, I still have my license number. I used to work for ICBC when I was a kid in public affairs and road safety. So did my mom. So I have all these things, but when I walk into ICBC, when this 6-month prohibition from Boyle should have ended, and when I had to pay the registration fee in order to do that, and when I walk into ICBC and the same fines that I was thrown in jail for in 2016, I need to pay again here at ICBC. And then just this May, I see that there's a $10,000 debt at the CRA between those tax years when I was on social assistance at the government's insistence. And so there's sort of, it's a lot of having the same kind of conversation. So it boils down to like this cell phone. And this is sort of what turns it into a technical problem. Is that it was my intention while I'm seeking work here, because it was with Source. I couldn't get my apprenticeship certifications. I couldn't get anything from my employer. I still don't know what my status is with the Canadian government for these medical assessments. There was 2 actually that were printed. One in 2017 for 3 months, and another one for a year. Or sorry, the 3 months was in 2016 August, and then one for a year in 2017 September, shortly after my means had been snatched out from under my feet. So I've got all this information, and I've still, no one's ever asked me a question about it. So I'm still calling like a 1-800 number, trying to send an email that someone's going to have a dialogue with me about. So this cell phone, the one that was the loaner, was returned. It was broken. I paid for it. I still have the receipt. And I just kind of shuffled it into this this lawsuit sort of black box bin of my life. And it's funny how many technical things go in there with a cell phone that it turns out I wasn't able to switch carriers with in 2018 April, May. Or sorry, 2019 May. Just 3-4 months ago. I'll include the relevant timetable, I guess, and then just for fact checking reference numbers. I mean, the way that I track data is photographs of documents rather than spreadsheet files, rather than sort of secondhand information. What I do is I ask for mail out, just because it's got a bit of a legal onus attached to it, right? So I just ask for the mail document. I take a photograph of it before I open it, and a photograph of it after I open it, and throw them on this standalone device, because Bell Media, after having had the device for 3 years and having owned it for the entire year that I was here, was billing me improperly, and I could see it. It was like $140 a month. I was getting billed for that cell phone. So I asked to see the bills for the last 3 months of that contract, and they never sent it. So so I went to TELUS. I took that device. I paid out Bell. I got an unlock code, and even though I think it was 2017, they enacted legislation that you can't lock telephones to carrier networks anymore. Mine was from 2016, and so it still would have had that. But the thing is, I got a new SIM card. I got a new account at TELUS. Never dealt with TELUS for a telephone before, and the phone, after having unlocked it, reverted back to a locked condition within 48 hours. So I spent a week going down to the Bell store, going into TELUS, trying to get this old phone working, having the same conversation, new SIM cards. Why don't you try this? All of a sudden, it became like the same sort of endless loop of nothing different for a week. So I got a new phone, and to this day, Bell still can't unlock that cell phone. So I use it for archiving, and I've been careful just because of what I told you about the surveillance aspect of it, and about sort of my limited but all of a sudden very important digital identity, I guess. Sort of all being lumped into this problem that isn't over. So the technical problem came when I asked for my bills. And I'm looking at them, and you can tell that they're not printed by a person. You can see that it's a process that is just an entry in a spreadsheet that pulls a number of cells. You can see the way that these cell phone plans are designed now are similar to how bank statements are designed, because for the first time in human history, there's wild sweeps in time zones for people. as like the synchronicity aspect of it. So when there's annual or biannual repetitions of plans or contracts or tracking of data, whatever that means, it's like, well, it is paying for radio. It's all of a sudden like orders of magnitude mathematically removed from anything that people can measure. And so my only consistent way that I've been able to speak with confidence about the facts of my story is by retaining, I just refer to them as nouns, retaining nouns. Whether it's keeping my receipt from the ATM, when some people just look at it and toss it away, a piece of paper and a photograph of that piece of paper that matches within a day or two to the digital timestamp of my device, my new device. And when I have a standalone system, a constant or a continuous timeline with documentation physically of the interruptions to that timeline, I can inform the driver's abstract with the patterns from one as being a measure of the other. And so, sort of in the same way that you can use a tape measure, and if you use the same tape measure, you get to know the marks on it, you get to have your little system of organizing whatever place on the tape measure that you're at. So instead of needing to have a sort of a linear process, a function or an algorithm to compare days, which is what spreadsheets do and which is what the trouble becomes when things need to be retrofitted with an order attached to them and a turnaround. Because between the driving aspect and the private registry and the scholarship aspect and the taxation, these are all different offices that don't share the same source information. So when there's an error or a repeat on one, or just one little mistake gets made, I found out that mistake, the source of it, was that the first time that I got a driver's license in Alberta, my birth date was entered incorrectly. And so it wound up being printed on the physical document as being March 10th of 77 instead of February 23rd of 77. So when I got a new birth certificate after moving back to BC, and I start comparing nothing to do with actual time, but just as like positions on a clock, or places in that revolve around me, my birth date, and having the differential in between, I kind of had the basis just in terms of what I knew the government was using now, and the mistakes that have been made before, to turn it into like a logic puzzle, essentially. And there's an intention to this, because in order to fix, for example, the PTSD diagnosis, in order to fix my taxation, I've got to fix my hours of work. In order to do that, I'm going to have to deal with employment insurance. In order to do that, these have been lumped together into the same year. It all unravels at the same time. And it's impossible to do. So what I'm doing is amalgamating an argument for the impossibility of entering facts to the offices that need them. I can't send emails. I don't blame well, I can send emails, but not with attachments or anything, right? And they can't discuss private information. I'm actually supposed to go to Alberta in person to show myself as the receipt that I want to submit to show that I'm who I am. Just a photograph of the thing. So it's these sort of policies that are so tight-knit that the onus is to never make a mistake, because there's not a way to fix one when you do. And to not be able to initiate a dialogue with the registry, with my MLA at the time, with WCB, with driver fitness and monitoring, with ICBC when I'm standing at their office saying you'll have to call Alberta. They're sending you a denied status. And then with not having paid it myself, having to deal with an employer who I'm pretty embarrassed to have to, like, with the way that things ended there, right? Because, I mean, they were worried about me. We were like family. And all of a sudden, in order to maintain my own unbiased fact-checking, such that I'm looking for errors that don't exist, that have repeated before, so that I can cover all the bases with one email. Because if I'm right, this feedback loop that's happening, this stagger, this offset of time, is sort of locked, and it will keep doing that because these networks are not streamed, right? So they're updated by the government once a month, and no matter what happens, more than one office is going to need to make an adjustment and hold a temporary condition for some time and let the other ones catch up. And so I need to come up with a schedule for fixing my digital identity with what they have already, and I have to do it in a way that I don't throw away the only asset that I have from the last 3 years, which is the facts and the lawsuit. And so my arguments are going to be technical in nature. They're going to be not my statements, not hearsay, not witness reports. They're going to be using the manipulation of information retroactively and having it locked in with an accusation, because it's not like it all shows up in the disclosure. There was